get back to.
Cool. I'll check out that link. The addicted to seeking phrase sounds interesting.
Yeah.
But you said he basically settled. He stopped seeking. He settled with Jesus.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was found.
Yeah. I have said a few things like recently. I try to make videos and then I end up deleting them. But like, I actually so I'm still struggling, right? But spiritually struggling. And
yeah,
I guess I've paid attention to Marcion. I don't know if you heard of Marcion.
no.
But he's not, his take's not going to agree with your take, but he basically was saying that Jesus was sent by God, and that there's the creator God, or is like the demiurge. So he basically said the Old Testament and the New Testament are separate and are different gods. That's what he said. And he basically, his gospel, we can't read it, but there's allusions to it from a lot of the other people's writing, which means that the winner, ended up destroying it. I mean, that's what happens. And so you have to wonder, is the winner good or is the winner bad? And then and part of his story is he skips the nativity. He basically says, Jesus appeared, right? And I guess, and then the thing that I've thought about this week is Jesus was tempted and said, you can have the whole world, and said no, but then he gets murdered, right? So it's like, to me, there's a legitimate take that there is a God of this world, and you either serve the God of this world or you get tortured and murdered.
Yeah.
And then there's another thing that happened to me that I was thinking about, is like, so he can command the demons and whatnot, and it's like if Jesus can command the demons, it's like, is he part of the trick? I don't know. I'm still struggling. The one thing that is good is I am practicing trying to be grateful more, because there's obviously a lot to be grateful for. You can look at things where there's pain and suffering, but there's also things that are pleasant and meaningful. And then you can you can be ignorant, right? You can be ignorant of the pain and suffering, and you can be ignorant of the things that you can be grateful for. But I've been struggling with all this. That's what I've been struggling with for weeks now.
Yeah, well, fair enough. Look, none of this. I don't think anyone ever said it was easy. and the guy that said, "Follow me, my yoke is light," he got crucified on a cross. Which is a big turnoff for a reasonable person, right?
Yeah, yoke makes me think of the thing that where they trap your head and your hands, and then torture you to death.
Yeah.
It's like that's the yoke.
Yep. And I think he's saying, you can't avoid a yoke. Mine is light compared to the yoke that you're currently under. You've convinced yourself that your current yoke is the best, but it's leading to perdition. And this is on a humanity-wide scale. And I'm looking at the state of the world, and I can certainly see us, marching towards perdition as we speak. So, and I made a note somewhere along the line is that so Paul likes to say, does he say religion is the always and politics is the now, or God is the always? I think he says religion is the always and politics is the now.
Politics is now, yeah. And Chad put out a video that I watched where that was in the title. So,
right.
And he was highlighting the strange events that happened.
Yeah. So so if you model biblical, the biblical worldview that we're given, it is that the God, heaven is God's dwelling place, but he made the heavens and the earth, heavens plural. He sits in the highest heaven, which is whatever that is, but let's call it the biggest place. And then when we look with our human eyes at the scale of the universe, it's vast, and it spans a long time as far as we can tell. So the people, ask, what's time about? Because we're very small, limited beings, but we've supposed to live in relationship with each other, but we also live in relationship with our ancestors, and our descendants will inherit stuff from us. So we're related to them by what we're handing over, right? So, and I'm talking in terms of knowledge and the whole shebang. Are we handing over a better place or a worse place? And you can ask, by what standard is it better or worse? And we don't control those things. We are governed by, in my worldview, we're governed by spirits, etc. But where the time, and then we've got this skill that we've been given or developed, which is that of writing and recording stories, right? And we write these things down and we hand these stories over from generation to generation. So we're all bit players in a big story over a long period of time. And in that thing that is the only way that we can grapple with God, is seeing him play out. So you can't see him in the now because we're too small to see what his actions are doing. But if you look, so this is just me prattling away in theory. Yeah. So essentially what time does is it makes us bigger. It makes us able to see him, because when you act as a collective across time with our ancestors, etc., then we can start to look at this, and then you can say, well, yeah, one of the things out of there that we can see is that, so taking that viewpoint, is you have the science of anthropology, which is digging up the stuff that our ancestors left behind and trying to piece out what they were up to. And the one thing you discover, and this is this theory that Darwin's theory of evolution actually points straight back to God, because hang on, humanity was religious, has always been religious. So then you say, okay, well, which religion? But it's all of a sudden you can see, so you have us modern folks who like super arrogant about our current powers and whatnot, and I don't need to be religious. And then you realize, but hang on, I'm part of a religious species. I best I wake up and open my eyes to see what is it that I worship. If I don't believe I'm religious, then etc., etc. So that is where this notion that time gives us the capacity to grapple with the big questions, because without it, you see such a small piece of anything that you've got no hope of putting any kind of puzzle together. So so that's my conception of that's my conception of time. That's one of the fruits of being stuck in time, is that you are gifted the capacity to look at the big picture.
So I think what came to mind for me is how many science fiction books I've read. And so if you have a creator of this world who's got a big story, again, that's what when you say religion, I hear story. And then I've read all these science fiction books, and I'm the guy who you get into the book and you can't put it down, and you get addicted to it. And it's cool that you can get to an end and then you're it's like a relief at that point. And so for me, like when I read a book, that's the time is compressed, and you get to see the character development and the story development, and there's and hopefully there's and there's a good ending. So what that does to me is it gives me an idea of the kinds of stories I like, and then it also, there's a part of me where I'm impatient. Like if I'm in the story, it can be so in comparison to books, all these books I've read, and so many of them, this story
is very slow.
It's slow.
It's spaced out in real time.
That's the kind of thing that makes me want to sometimes, go back to sleep, or to go into a video game, or go and read a book, or do things because all of a sudden it's a little bit boring, in comparison.
You're waiting for the next thing to occur that that will be of relevance to the story.
I mean, and then another thing that while you're speaking, I was like, I look at the world and I say, it's like, well, I have an idea of how this world could be better, but people don't really care about my ideas, and that's partly my fault. But then there's also this part of, there's an allusion to like people are motivated by spirits. You're saying that. Well,
yep.
Two more things I listened to this week. I went looking. It's like, I met Satan, videos about that. I met Satan, and I found one. I think his name was Crunchy Black with 3-6 Mafia, and he met the same one I met. Shapeshifter, can deceiver, powerful.
Yep.
And so there's people who are being shaped by that. And then there's people, and then you'll have people who say, well, I was in the grips of a demon or Satan, and then I found Jesus. And then I just know that if I go and try to connect with that person and try to help them become a better person, it's not going to work very well. And because the thing is even the people who believe that they are protected and have a shield up because of Jesus, they also are possessed, such that their ability to do error correction and to be more productive and to help more people is limited by a spirit of arrogance, a spirit of knowing. And that's why, you mentioned this phrase, addicted to seeking. It's like, if you want to do error correction, you are kind of a seeking at that point. You have to be seeking if you want to do error correction and if you have goals. But
and it depends at what level you're seeking, right? So if you believe, because I think most Christians, because you get the zealot new convert who's sort of literally walking on water and super excited with the whole new conversion and experience. And then they realize how little they know, and then they've got to learn how to fill in the hierarchies of this empty temple that they've just created with just someone at the top, but it's an unpopulated temple, or it's still populated by demons hidden in corners and cupboards, which is the more is in fact the more likely scenario. So I don't know if I've met anyone who's a saint, who's only possessed with the Holy Spirit. I've not encountered such a being, to my knowledge. So that.
But we aren't looking for saints.
No, sure.
Maybe we should be looking for saints.
But I'm not encountering them, so they're rare.
And then, but we also if you go around saying, "Hey, I think I'm the most saintly person around. Let me help you," that immediately that you get.
That's a turn off.
Right?
You can't announce your own sanctity.
But
that's a great big red flag.
It's a red flag, but it's like, well, people aren't. I'm claiming that the problem is we're not looking for saints, and it would be good if we could find them. And what better way would it be than for saints to say, hey, I've been trying to be a saint for years. I'm still trying, and I might be better than most people at being a saint, right? Put me on the list, or something like that.
Yeah. And put me to the test.
Yeah, put me to the test. I mean, I think that's what God does. I mean, I think that's what we're here being tested, that's the best question.
Yeah.
That's the best take I have for what this is. This is like a prison and a testing ground, and it's I don't know what I'm hoping that the CHE works out.
Well, it's, let's just say that it's the only basket that I've currently putting any eggs towards. Which is dangerous, but it's in for a penny, in for a pound. You may as well just go for it.
Well, this thing is so slow. This story is so slow. It could take 20 years before the CHE even starts.
Don't tell me that.
This is a slow story, Jason. We're in a very slow story.
For sure. I mean, it's certainly been slow for the last year, right?
But just go look at Tesla, or go look at innovators and the discovery of an idea and how long it takes for that, and how that idea grows and spreads over time, and it's kind of slow.
Yeah, and I've been doing a little bit of research, which I was watching a sustainability type lady who's sort of, when I do typing or whatnot, I have stuff in the background, and then if something catches my attention, I'll pause the typing and have a listen. And so she spoke to, or she, on her channel, she had a guy who was essentially telling the same story as that economist, commodities researcher that did that video on, you smoke and crack if you think we're going to roll out this new renewable energy transition. It just ain't going to happen just based on resources, because it takes, I don't know what, let's say it was 14 years to bring a new mine into production from the time you put your application in. So that's a 14-year process. And a new mine is kind of it's a known process. The CHE is kind of an unknown entity. And then she was critiquing. She was building 4 models. She was talking about her thesis work, and she built 4 models of the future. And fortunately, she did say up front, models aren't reality, but they may produce something useful. So she put that caveat in, and then she spent the rest of the time talking about the models and what they predicted.
Yeah.
But so she was doing scenario projections, a little bit like the IPCC does, low business as usual case, high development, low development, whatever. And then she was critiquing the people who say, oh, but technology will save us. Because she was saying, yeah, but look at the pace of innovation. And she made exactly the same point you just made about Tesla. Look at how long it takes to take a new thing from the idea to, out into the world. She said that takes a long time. We don't have time to do that.
And we don't, like, the thing I'm pointing at is the same idea of, well, do we want to find the saints? As another thing is, do we actually care to find the people who we should be listening to? As like the history, the part of this story is a story of humans having been given gifts to spread to the world, and then just being ignored. And sometimes even after they die, then the people rediscover the gift that the other person's just like, what? I think it's a pattern. And it has something to do with the arrogance that's connected to people saying, well, I've found it. This is why that maybe addicted to seeking might actually be, it's not a terrible idea, but I think you have to be goal oriented. You have to be aiming at something. And And you have to get good at not switching to all these other kinds of goals. You know, you need to know the best goal.
Yeah. So I'll tell you an interesting little story because it sort of intersects and overlaps. So things we've spoken about in the past. So in South Africa, there was this new culture was born. It was called the Afrikaner, which was essentially a mixture of mainly Western European cultures. So the Afrikaans language is actually closest to Flemish, but Flemish is like a tiny minority, but the bulk of the Afrikaners were made up of, I think, Huguenots. So from my ancestor was a Huguenot, and then there were some Brits who came out who Africanized, etc., but they're in the minority. Anyway, so when then Mandela was, then when the Afrikaners voluntarily gave up power and said, all right, we'll become a representative democracy. And so the Afrikaner then was a minority which has now become a marginalized minority. So they're now, you know, the shoe's on the other foot, and they're experiencing what was done to them, and what they did to others is now being done to them. But, you know, obviously their cultural ties goes back to Western Europe, as do, you know, yours and so on, because America was largely settled by Europeans initially. And so they had, I suppose, so they wanted to retain their culture and continue and stay bound with modern civilization. So they set up an intentional community so a group of them set up an intentional community, and that was this little one-horse town in the middle of the desert, sort of where I envisage the CHE can go, but they stuck, this river was in this town was in the banks of a river, and it was a rundown, ramshackle shithole. excuse my language. And they have just announced their plans to develop into a city. So so I think this project was dreamt about in the 60s, because they could see the writing on the wall, nothing happened, and then it started happening after Mandela's release. And they've very recently, so they're about to become energy independent, and they've announcing plans for cityhood. And they're doing this on some sort of cooperative basis. And so they've bought a whole swath of land, and they've included agricultural zones, and the town is owned by this cooperative. And if you want to go and live there, you have to apply. It's an Afrikaner cultural program based around Christianity, but they always talk about the Christianity, but it's like this afterthought. Oh yeah, and we're Christian as well, but it's really they're idolizing their culture. They're trying to save their culture. So that's anyway. So it's all the people that unfortunately I was not a very nice young person, because I came from an Afrikaner culture, and I moved and then I adopted my mother tongue and became an Englishman. I started dreaming in English a year before I left school. And then when I lived in South Africa, I'd have periods in Afrikaner culture and periods in the English culture, because
I lost you.
And
so in this community, they would not speak English?
So they're generating English YouTube videos, and they've got, and then they get a few complaints, and then they say, "Hang on, we go and look at Afrikaans things, that we live in the world, and we're not trying to be isolated from the world. We recognize that we're part of the world." we're just trying to protect our culture, but we also want to learn and integrate with the world. So they have two platforms, an English platform and an Afrikaner platform. But, you know, when you listen to these guys, I mean, I was surprised at how well spoken they are in English, which is telling me that they're spending a lot of time speaking English, because their English isn't bad. And yeah, so that was, so the town is called Orania, O-R-A-N-I-A, and they've, and what was interesting was Nelson Mandela's, so they've gotten a lot of, they've been attacked by the press in South Africa for being, you know, racist and exclusivist, etc., etc., especially in the beginning years. Now they're being taken as serious players because their town works, and they're about to go energy inefficient, and they've just built, which is impossible in South Africa, they've just developed and built their own great big new sewage treatment plant, and they're showing this to the world. Look what we've done here with our very limited resources, and etc., etc., and a lot of it with donations from, interestingly enough, even European communities. So there's a Austrian, I forget exactly, but there's a region in Italy called Tyrol that was hived off Austria and thrown into Italy. And then under Mussolini, these guys were severely culturally smacked. So their kids weren't allowed to speak Austrian in school. They were basically trying to force them to integrate into the Italian culture, and they resisted this. So this community survived as an Austrian-speaking Italian culture, and they've now formed a sister bond with this bunch of you know, Calvinist Afrikaner ex-Europeans. So they do cultural exchanges where they visit each other and whatnot. And I'm telling you this just because it's interesting to talk about, but I suspect that there might be something to learn from these guys from the CHE point of view, because they literally went and into the desert and built something up from scratch. And it's, you know, so they started in 1993. So it's, what's that? You know, that's a long time. It's 23 years plus 7 is 30 years because initially they were mocked and they were derided by the sort of the governing classes, and a lot of Afrikaners just thought they were wasting their time. And these guys showed backbone, and they are now have earned respect. So Nelson Mandela's grandson was in Morocco on some soccer exchange program, and apparently this, they were telling me about it. Suddenly, the town of Orania trended on Twitter. So they got phoned by the press, and they didn't even know they were trending on Twitter because they're actually busy working. And so they said, "Oh, you better check out Twitter. You guys are hot." And they thought, "Oh, geez, you know, someone else kicking us." And there were these Moroccan guys who were absolutely giving them the thumbs up and saying, "Geez, awesome guys, well done. You know, the whole of South Africa is trying to murder you, and the whole place is falling down around you. They can't keep the lights on, and look what you guys have done. You know, well done you."
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. And then another one that comes to mind, I work with a few people who live in Estonia. So
yes.
There's the Estonians. I like they're pretty much all on the internet. Like their whole government is on the internet, which
right
is to me is like nice to have. Like that.
Yes.
I don't understand. Like the reason we aren't on the internet, I'd say two main reasons. Or the big one is because we have terrible leadership and the systems are corrupt and the people are corrupt. That's the big one. But if you were to actually do it right, or try to do it right, you'd have to find people who aren't corrupt and get them to do it and get them to do it right. And then number 3, you wouldn't have as much corruption, right? A lot of our corruption is based on having archaic systems that are controlled by corrupt people. But yeah, I'd like, Irania sounds interesting. I mean, the point you said, it's a city on a river. I mean, having a river to start with, that's water's key. Got to have some water.
well, and they recognize that. And the reason why they had to become energy independent was primarily that they were, because they are feeding themselves, and the way they're irrigating out of a river, and they had electrified pumping systems, so they were entirely dependent on the government, the national grid, to and South Africa's just having this ever increasing load shedding schedule, where you have these rolling planned scheduled blackouts in municipal areas. It's so bad that I actually on February 10th, the South African president declared a national emergency, and my mother just texted me this morning to say that they are now getting load shedding in 4.5 hour time blocks. Yeah, that's half a working day when it hits you.
You go 4.5 hours without power.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's different than 4.5 hours with power.
Yeah. It is rather. So my mother's blessed. Her life just continues riding on because she didn't invest in a battery backed up solar system. So her fridge keeps running. The only thing she can't do is cook with the oven because that's separated out of the systems. It's just too big an energy hog. But yeah, and none of the government officers have bothered to basically back up their power supply. I'm guessing, the premier's office, the bigwigs offices will be supplied with power, but all the government services, like, if you want to go and get a passport, none of those facilities are available when there's a power outage. And these people, presumably, they're smart enough to bring little gas stoves, or they just go home and get paid. But they have zero incentive to fix this because they just get paid. They get a paid holiday every day. So there's no incentive to fix it. So I was telling my wife, she said, but surely they, I said, no, they're still getting paid.
But this is, I guess, the government work kind of pattern. It's everywhere. Like I moved to a smaller town, and every time we want to go mess with our local government, right, to pay a bill or manage services, it's terrible. These people, they're either, they're selecting from people who didn't graduate from high school or something like that. But then right down the street is a Chick-fil-A. It's a fast food restaurant. And Chick-fil-A, they've got these managers that are you go on an app, you tell them what you want, you can go through drive through, and they hand it to you, and they've got smiles, and they're nice.
Yes.
And if they mess up, they're apologetic and they make things right.
Yep. And then you're going to interact with a bureaucracy, and it's the exact opposite experience.
I've thought about it. Like, it'd be funny to go to the city council meeting and say, we need to hire those folks that work at Chick-fil-A to come replace all these workers in the city.
Yep.
Yeah. But, the city workers, if you can't get fired, right, then you're there's no incentive for you to actually care and try.
Yeah.
And that's true for like any organization, I guess.
Yeah. And so there's the spirit thing going on. So the spirit in Irania it's sort of like what's that notion of a small remnant so it's like you've burned through Afrikanerdom and you found a very small core of committed people and says, stuff this, we're not going to die. And they found those people, and they've gone and actually done it.
So the Christian part, like I've been listening to Christians and theologians talk about Marcion, and what I'm wondering is, like, who would be accepting if I were to be like someone who says, okay, I love Jesus so much that I even think that Jesus' God is different than the Jewish God. And I even think Jesus' God is better than the Jewish God. And then all those stories you read, I don't care about those. I also like cannabis, psilocybin, and I don't think we need a license to practice medicine. And so, like, would that be the kind of Christian that would be welcome in Orania?
Probably not.
Right. See that, and to me, that's
the minute you bring the cannabis thing in, you're done.
well. So the cannabis, I mean, it cures cancer. It helps with epilepsy. You can go from like many seizures a day to a seizure per week. I mean, this is what I'm talking about: practicing medicine without a license, using plants, right?
Yeah, and I did say probably because, to be honest, I don't know, because I know that the cannabinoids are now legal in South Africa. So my mother, so for medicinal purposes, it's available, and I think it's very similar to certain states in, like California. I think you can grow the stuff, and so I think it's decriminalized in South Africa, but I'm speaking based on my memory of what I used of the Afrikaner culture that I grew up in. So I've got no idea whether they would go for it, but I just, based on my past knowledge, I would say I suspect not, but I don't, to be honest, I don't know.
But I just described, just so you know, I just described my kind of Christianity, right? So I love Jesus. I love the idea that you would be willing to be tortured to death and die for your enemies, right? Like that's something to aspire toward, given the state of the world. And then I'd also and so that's, you have to remember that. And then, who are my enemies? Well, if you want to lock people in cages for growing plants, growing cannabis, psilocybin, and practicing medicine, then you're my enemy, right? So but I still love you. But that's the kind of Christian I am, is like, I don't care much about Old Testament books or New Testament books. And I met Jesus twice. So, and in my dreams, that's what he did, and he was a gardener, right? So he was willing to be tortured and killed, by his enemies, and while loving them, and was a gardener. So that's what I'm going off of. That's the Jesus. That's the Jesus I know.
And I've no idea what role cannabis may or may not play in the kingdom, because it is a created plant, etc., etc. So well, I mean, if the thing is it's in my opinion, it's a medicine, and so if God healed everyone, where we didn't need medicine, then I would imagine there'd be no need for these things. But obviously, we're in a world where people are sick and have diseases, and plants do help. Like, plants are necessary for us to live, for our air. It's like, could you imagine a paradise where there's just no plants, and all of us, we're in these bodies that don't need air or food? Maybe. I don't think that's the kind of garden I'm interested in.
Right. Well, it's a different kind of a paradise, right? Is it a paradise where where you're eating fruit and plants and breathing in the air it helps produced by plants, or is it a paradise where you're in a body that doesn't need any food and doesn't poop or anything?
And and obviously my conception is those things happen at so there's the material level where we need the physical manifest garden of plants, and then there's the upper realm which is the realm of patterns, where who knows what that's like. I wouldn't have a clue, and I'm not focusing on that at all. It's the main goal is to get the CHE going, and the current route I've got is to get that website up. And although I'm not saying it there, so I don't know if you saw the revision 2 that I sent you.
I looked through that this morning.
So what I haven't done, but it's in there, and it's sort of implied, is that the first goal is to get someone to run the CHE through a recognized test, so that it can meet the world standards. Does it work according to science?
Well, I do think you could, I'll say it again, get published, right? If you could get it published, I think that's the way you get universities and physics departments and weather, climatologists and all of these people to get interested, to become aware of it, and maybe use that as a source of more studies and experiments, right? But
yeah, sure. And I'm not. I'm just following this current intuition, which will.
I think it's good. I mean,
which will achieve a sort of a significant milestone in the next, 6 weeks or whatever the case may be. And
it doesn't hurt to have your religion out on the internet, I don't think.
Yeah. And to me, it's that little, it's sort of it's an outrageous climb, the red flag to the bull, and let's see if it's a let's see if it gets people worked up. And let's see if it gets people wanting to prove us wrong. That's my first goal.
Yeah, you've got an outrageous claim. It's like my outrageous claim would be something like, and maybe there at some point in my future, God could make sure I don't get tortured and murdered, and would raise me up. Then I would be able to really help the world, right? Instead of having Joe Biden as president of the United States, if you had me or someone else who listened to me, you would have a better world. Like, that's a red flag. It's the same. It's very similar to saying, well, I try to be a saintly person. I've been working on it for decades, and I'll continue working on it for decades. And if you put me on a list, there's not many people who are more saintly than me, right? Like, if you got the percentages of distribution of saintly people, there's going to be people at the far end who are the best, most qualified saints, right? Like, and you say that's a red flag. It's like, yeah. So you're putting out a religion that will be a red flag for some people.
Yeah, for sure.
Or a religious view, or a view of the Christian Bible, right? I don't know exactly how you want to phrase it, but you're calling it Christianity, right?
Well, at the moment, yes, because although that Christianity will disappear, this is the, in my view, the next. This is the metamorphosis of Christianity.
Right.
So, yeah, and it's interesting. I've been trying to find, because at some point, and this is a problem I've been trying to crack, is what eschatology, which is how does the story unfold? How does the story actually unfold? And is it biblical, et cetera, et cetera. So I've been trying to understand this eschatology, because there's all this imagery of death and destruction in Revelation and in the prophets, of what's going to happen in that day when, and there's the treading of the grapes of wrath, and the robe covered in red grape juice, which symbolizes blood, which is, in my estimation, it's simply the pressing of the wine to produce the spirits that has to go into the CHE, right? And then Peterson says, anyway, so just to step it back, so there's this, so Paul says, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, we wrestle against principalities and powers. And then there's this image of a great slaughter in Revelation, and then where the bodies are, the vultures will gather. Says, jeez, this is a terrible slaughter. But we wrestle not against flesh and blood, we wrestle against principalities and powers. And the vultures are imagery of, the heavenly beings with wings, which are going to essentially pick upon the carcass of the dead beings. And I think I've found all the books, because I've been, it's like when you're searching online for a patent, did someone else patent a CHE? If you don't get your search terms right, you could literally walk right past another patent and be directed to something. But because you didn't precisely put the right search terms in, you just miss it, you don't see it. So same thing, trying to search the Bible for various key ideas or passages. If you don't land with the right search terms, you'll miss the thread that That's actually
Right.
runs throughout the book.
And then you're also, you have Greek and you have Hebrew, and so you have these translations and
Yeah, which makes it even tougher. So essentially, so so obviously the Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed, and then there was this very vivid imagery just before they, was it just before, just after they entered the Promised Land, where they marched around Jericho's walls for 7 days and blew the trumpet, and then the walls fell down, and and then the Israelites were commanded never to rebuild Jericho, but of course they didn't listen to God as usual, and Jericho got rebuilt. And then Jesus told, he judged three towns in Galilee were judged because they he went there to preach. They had no faith, and they chased him out of the towns. And he said, "Woe unto you, whichever the towns were." I've got the passage up, and I won't. It will be worse for you on the day of judgment than Sidon and Tyre. And then Tyre is damned by. There's a prophecy against Tyre in Ezekiel, where the king of Tyre is referred to as someone who was a cherub in the garden of God, who was there right at the beginning in Eden. So then you're slowly starting to put this together, that these principalities and powers, or these fallen angels, their bodies are literally the structures in the centers. Basically, their bodies are the temples in the center of these towns, and then the city gets built around them. So the people that are going to be judged and thrown into the burning pit of fire are the fallen angels, who are the ruling principalities and powers of the world. And then you find the judgment, because I was just thinking, okay, so there's Sodom and Gomorrah, and then there was this one. But these are just a few cities. Okay, so you could just say, look, it's just the people in the cities, and it's these poor bastards are going to get damned. And then I found, just today, I found the scriptures where it is being said that all your cities will be destroyed. So essentially, I think I found the eschaton. So essentially, the current cities are basically they follow. I think I've told you this before. They follow the pattern of Babylon, and these cities are functionally built to trade and profit and etc. etc. So they're built with their functional goals in mind. Whatever that might, which is the idols that they worship, you could say. So I believe I found the biblical thread very clearly now, where it is essentially saying what is happening is that all the cities are going to be cast down, and this is a 1,000-year process, and they are going to be replaced by a new kind of city. And my claim is the CHE is that new kind of city. And the first one is the Queen of the South, which shall rise in judgment, so the Queen of the South is where people in the future will look, so the first one, which will be a model city, which will judge all the other cities, because you now have a new ideal, a new standard where you say, look at this city, produces its own water, doesn't suck rivers dry, it creates rivers. You don't pave over half your real estate with tarmac, which generates potholes and has to be filled and filled and filled. Your streets are now vertical streets in elevators, etc., etc. So the argument is, and the power generation is 24/7 base load, geothermal power that doesn't create any pollution. So you have an ideal city which will judge all existing cities, and then bolted on top of that is, where did the city come from? Who does it serve? Which is the spiritual purpose. So that's the point of the website, and that's the eschatology. I've actually found the biblical passages which is the prophecies of the destruction of all the cities.
Well, the only thing I would tie into that is, I've met, maybe people would call it Satan. I've met some demons, and so it would be cool if Satan and the demons were cast into, and I've been to the lake of fire. It'd be cool, and there was nobody there. It'd be cool if Satan and the demons were cast into the lake of fire. I would be on board with that story. But
yeah. I mean, what I'm talking about is so far removed from my everyday lived experience. It's I've just had I've just dropped some acid, so this is what I can talk about.
I don't believe you. When you do psilocybin, it's like I told my wife, it's like you pretty much disappear. Like, I'm Gavin. Gavin goes away, and you actually are just left with, like, And the thing is that's not actually the process, but it was for me. Like the first time, it was like it actually was. Oh, I feel like I'm about to die, and then it even got to the point like where I even, in hindsight, like if I wasn't going to just submit, then I may have even died. I could have had a heart attack. I was having so much anxiety. And finally I was like, it's okay if I die. And then Gavin disappeared. And then like Gavin died. And then the thing that came out of it 5-6 hours later and a day or 2 days later, after the effects left, was not the same Gavin. It was a different Gavin.
Sure. Yep.
But yeah, so I don't believe you're
I
know from experience.
Yep. So you just called my BS, right?
Yeah. But I mean, I've actually I've been to these places and I even met the demons while awake. So it's like I know these things are real. And then I even see it. Like I see the spirits in people throughout the world. So it's like, and that's what's, I think, disappointing or depressing, or like, and I think it's related to being impatient and ignoring what I can be grateful for. So I need to practice being more grateful for the good that's all around us all the time. But I'm definitely seeing the bad a lot.
And I'll reiterate, just so I'm not shut off against the idea of
even if you
of the getting a paper published, but I am so jaded. My opinion of the institutions of this world is, if you, I don't know what metaphor to use, but if you gave them pure truth and dumped it on their lap, they wouldn't recognize it.
Well, so
they would not recognize it.
I'm jaded as well. Like I'm jaded with even the religious folk. Like so we're creating a website to kind of share the eschatology connected to CHE. I'm jaded about that. I'm jaded about
and a big part of me is I'm doing it in faith. I'm doing it in faith because you never know what, and then it's up to the spirit to make something of it, because you'll put it out there, and then you'll say, okay, there's nothing more I can do.
Well, I like that idea. I like the idea of we did this convective heat engine site. I like the idea of sharing your religion, and then it seems like a fine order to then go and try to get published, like to create something that, I mean, it's something where putting out your religious view, it may not even be seen. Like the CHE and stuff might actually just gain traction, and people won't even notice that the person who with the idea that gets published and maybe even takes off, they might not even see that it's connected to a religious view and to like a connection to God.
And getting it published shows seriousness. etc. It shows commitment to the endeavor. You still, and it shows faith and belief in what in the claims you've made, right? By saying, I still think this is real because here I am using my own valuable attention and time, scarce as it is, to
well, I need to go soon, but I'm gonna I have the hope and the faith, but the fear that I have is because I've had it happen to me on a handful of occasions, is having the hope and the faith shattered. So, but
and we've already experienced that with old Elon. So there you go.
Well, I mean, if we got it, if somehow you and I both were presented with facts that said, especially, I would just say if you were presented with facts where someone said, oh, this is where you made your mistake and why the CHE won't work, then that would be a shattering experience, which I've been through similar kinds of shattering experience. And I'm not joking. Like I've been in positions where I'm like, oh yes, I'm doing God's work, and this is the most meaningful experience ever, and then have it shattered. So it's like, I've been through that a few times. So it could happen, but then that's embarrassing, it's humiliating, and that's what we're doing. We're setting ourselves up for being embarrassed and humiliated, and that's okay.
And I mean, I'm the one in line for the most humiliation, and I'll have to apologize to you for misleading you, because I wasn't smart enough to
I know it's
spot
important.
the significant flaw that's lurking there.
I know what's important. What's important is it's important for me to be a good husband and father, right? That's
and find
that's
the truth, whatever it may be. Let the truth be the arbiter.
I'm seeking it. I don't know it.
All right, Gavin. I'm sorry I kept you hanging there for 25 minutes.
That's
apologize.
All right.
I will stop looking for the red dot, and I'll put my glasses on and see and read the most current thing that appeared on the thing.
Well, you can always shoot me a message and say, hey, are you there?
And I will next time if I get confused.
All right. I may actually put this one on my YouTube channel.
Yeah, go for it.
All right.
I'm cool with it. All right. Have a good one.
You too.
Cheers. Bye.